Hello. Testing to the world.
Hello.
Tim, you look like you're in a new building, a new space. You're standing for health reasons. You're
I'm
coughing for
standing.
health reasons.
Yeah, it's good for you, coughing. To do as much as you can. Yeah, I'm in. My partner's working from home today, so we're in separate rooms.
Yeah.
And this room has a little more light because the desk kind of space I've created for myself in the other room is a little bit wrapped in bookcases at the moment, so it's a little too dark.
Right. Yeah.
This is actually a nice room.
And we'll. I'm just going to adjust some audio levels. If there's anybody watching, please let me know in the chat if it's not good. But yes. So I'm on a journey of I started this thing of doing these streams to show about how I was going to build a podcast about built all around the vanity idea, the vain idea of why'd you follow me, and this is also. So it's great. And I had some initial enthusiasm from people who wanted to be on the podcast. I even did a call with one person, tried scheduling a couple other calls with people, and it's going fine other than I'm just dragging my heels on it. And so I'm a little bit at this, like, so here's what we're going to talk about today is less tech stuff, more just like the ideas around podcasting, the why and the how. And Tim is the unofficial, I don't think you've ever professionally been a therapist, have you?
No.
Client work is
But
kind
you
of
want me?
therapy.
You want me to be one?
Yeah, you'll
That
cosplay.
is true, actually. Yeah.
Cosplay as a therapist today, and then also we'll flip it around, and then Tim has some gear questions that we'll cover as he dances around his room. I think you're filming TikToks while we're doing this. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, well, I realized I took off my vest because I was a little warm. Then I realized there's something on my sweatshirt, so I have to put my vest back on.
So, if there was viewers, if we had people watching, I don't know if there is any, but that would be one of the clippable moments. They would say, identify what's on Tim's shirt in that brief moment he appeared on camera.
Yeah.
So yes, the main question, the main thing I want to be called out on by you and or anyone in my life really is like, I start with an idea for a thing. I do the initial fun, at least for me, what's fun, where setting up the name, it's kind of like registering a domain name for a website, but similarly for a podcast, or like starting a band back in the day was like, you spend all this time coming up with a name and arranging who's going to do what, who's going to bring which instrument. And then when it comes time to actually like book a gig, practice, you're like, these guys are kind of, and all of a sudden you find things wrong with the people or with the idea or with the name. And really it's like, it's laziness is at the core of it a lot of times, for myself anyways.
Yeah, it's easy this is a syndrome I'm extraordinarily familiar with. And in fact, just this morning, I was going through those first steps on a project, being like,
nice.
This sounds fun. I could do this.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I'm very familiar with that.
I don't know what there's obviously imposter syndrome that we talk about a lot I hear talked about a lot in the web dev world. There's probably a name for this that's more fancy than just lazy idea syndrome or something, but.
Yeah, because I don't think it's fair to call it laziness. Like there are lazy people, and I do have some lazy aspects to my personality, absolutely. But like this particular thing is like it's a matter of not being able to visualize the complexity of it until you start getting into it, and then once your brain is like, oh, it's more than just A, B, and C. Like A, B, and C each have subparts, and those subparts have subparts, and like for me in particular, if I can't wrap my head around all those steps, then I hit a wall.
Right. And sometimes it's like, at least for me, sometimes it's not factoring in other people. And so, I mean, this is again where it's like easy to blame a third party that has no idea they're being blamed for you not doing a thing.
Sure.
But like sort of in the instance of this podcast idea is like scheduling. Scheduling is like a nightmare, at least for me. I'm not a scheduler person. I hate arranging appointments even just for like a inanimate object like my vehicle, never mind arranging stuff on the calendar with a person who then also has their own dates and times and struggles obviously with doing that, and especially when there's very little at stake in terms of like money or professional currency, whatever, then it's always like it's a back burner thing, which is fair. I'm not trying to put any sort of professional intensity on a podcast hobby. So I have to imagine that like if you're pick whatever on the weird side, like the Joe Rogans of the world, or the Daily Show, or some of the bigger entities out there, when they call you to book an appointment or book a schedule an interview for their podcast, I'm sure they're greeted with a little more intensity and
Yeah.
enthusiasm. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, anyways, that's sort of like one aspect of this therapy session, and then the other side of it is also when we started this project, or I started this project, and then you sort of came on board as like a guru to. I keep ascribing guru status to you just for the sake of the conversation, but like
Psychic. I prefer psychic.
psychic or sidekick.
Yeah. Sidekick.
Okay.
I would not call myself a psychic.
Just clarifying there. So it was a different time, which sounds bizarre that it was like whatever, maybe 2 months ago. I should look at my thing here. Like, oops, that's the wrong one. I didn't mean to get rid of Tim. There we go. Because I think, it was actually just the beginning of this year. January 6th is when I did my first solo stream, and then I think you came on board on the 16th, so mid-January basically, which was, let's just call a spade a spade. It was a few weeks before or maybe that was when the inauguration was. I forget all the dates and times, but
the inauguration was January 20th, I believe.
Yeah.
And then, yes, things have changed a little bit.
Yeah, and obviously, like, I mean, you and I are obviously at war here as well, because you're literally putting tariffs on this stream right now. And so, we're at war, which changes the dynamic drastically. And then our countries, respectively, are at war, trade war. And so that changed the dynamic. And then just the chaos that obviously Trump and everything has brought. And so there's the other angle to like...
You have a new prime minister, or about to have a new prime minister.
Yes.
Is what I understand.
Yeah. And which is, I can't imagine that whole, like, he agreed to step into this role because he's the current Trudeau is stepping down. So Carney is his name, Mark Carney. And so he agreed to step into this role, which he's been in that arena for a while. But I just can't imagine, like, do you go to your family and be like, I'm going to be prime minister, but then also it means I have to deal with Trump now. Maybe I shouldn't do this. Like, and kudos to him for taking it on. Like, Anyways.
The Canadian system is much more similar to the UK system. Is that correct? And
don't quote me on political intelligence here, but it would be like there isn't a nearly as long a process. We elect members of parliament for our area, and then if that party has the most members of parliament that get elected,
they choose the prime minister.
Their leader, of their party is then de facto prime minister. And so when that leader steps down,
exactly. So it's a lot easier for that leader to step down and to replace them.
Yeah.
Than it is in our system.
Yes, it still doesn't happen that often, but it has happened, and it's not this shocking thing.
But I mean, you wouldn't want to happen that often because, as the UK has been experiencing, the constant turmoil of, and not recently. I think they've been pretty steady for a couple of, but there was a couple of years there where there was there was 3 or 4 in fairly rapid succession, and it caused them a lot of problems.
Yeah, and so that's where it's funny watching the U.S. politicians and people, the chaos creators trying to make hay out of this thing that's happening, where most of Canada, if they're at all aware of how it works, is just kind of like, well, this is just what happened. Like, there's pressure on the new prime minister then to call for an election so that the country can say, hey, do we actually support this new person or not? But there's no requirement, and it's not a politically shady thing not to call one right away either. And so, anyways, so that's a fun little tangent into but that is part of the thing that's going on, where it feels, I think I'm struggling with this. It was a silly vanity idea in January 2025, way back then, like 2 months ago, and be kind of fun. Now it feels silly, and I this is also piggybacking off of a great conversation I had yesterday with I don't know if you know Brad Frost. He's a bit of a web dev guy around town, and
I don't know him, but we've met a couple of times.
Oh, cool. I've never met him, but just chatted online and maybe working on a project with him, podcast related thing. But his podcast idea is kind of like something that's been percolating for a while in my own brain. Let's just see here, make sure I got the right tabs open. Safari was being a turd for me yesterday. Kept rebooting. Brad Frost. I think I can go back
And
now.
Brad is pushing out a couple of big, very personal, not very personal, very big personal projects. Like I don't know if he's stepping away from client work entirely, but he and his brother are working on a curriculum to teach people how to work with design systems. Is that an accurate
Yes.
description?
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure all of this is public. Like he's talked about it. I saw it on Mastodon. But
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Courses that he's doing, and then also just kind of like this is a funny project. He's got fun project, not funny, but fun project of cold album drumming, where he's just like recording himself drumming along to whole albums, and where he's heard them, but he has never played drums to them before. He's a musician, quite talented, and so yeah, he said he's got like I forget 75 recordings of himself playing along to drums, like full video, and so Daft Punk and Radiohead in Rainbows and Santa Gold, there's other ones as well that he's played along to the entire album. Each song is its own video, of course, with drums. So that's just like a fun side project that's still pretty massive.
It's been really interesting to watch him over the past couple of years because he and his family went through some tough times, especially during COVID and immediately after COVID. And the past year or two, he's really been like very deliberate about refinding joy in his life, and a lot of that is about music, and a lot of that is just about working what he wants to work on. And he's kind of been very inspirational in terms of taking charge of his own happiness.
Yeah, and that's exactly what. So I can't find the website for it. Maybe it's not completely public. He talked like it sort of was, but I don't want to spill anything that's not to the 5 viewers or whatever ends up seeing this. But at any rate, a podcast around the idea of interviewing people. It's like your basic idea of interviewing people, tech and web, and then moving out beyond that circle into music and creative. Anybody who's creative, basically, but talking about what helps them, what brings them joy, what helps them get up in the morning and things like that, and focusing on that as a podcast in light of all the things going on in the world and not in spite of. And so which twigged a memory of my own that where am I here? So this is a podcast idea that I'd started before. You can see like 2023, mid 2024. I've been sort of messing around with. Obviously, got to the point of setting up a Transistor website and recorded a few dummy episodes by myself, and then also used AI to sort of mimic what it would be like to have a conversation with somebody about this, and got to the point. But again, it's a guest-driven podcast, and but around the idea of like stuff that keeps me up at night, and sort of, I guess, playing therapist of sorts. But here's what's keeping me up at night. Here, you, the guest, what's keeping you up at night, and we just sort of riff and talk about those things and come up with silly or serious things to help kind of get over those things or work through them, or just continue on the road of working through them. And I've gotten lots of great feedback from people who've sort of checked it out or talked through the idea, but it's just, again, it got to that point of like, now I need to actually schedule guests with people, or schedule conversations with people. And am I willing to put it out there and do that? And that's where it stalled. And then, and so, but that conversation with Brad made me think back to this podcast idea and wanting to more delve into this, where people would have an outlet to maybe talk about some of the stress. Like, I'm not a political major. I'm not trying to like fix racism or fix political messes created by petty men in fancy suits. But like to be able to talk about it in a way that's potentially helpful with someone like me, who is not your father-in-law who always rants at you about a thing, or is not your sister-in-law who won't listen when you're just trying to explain this thing. But like, I don't have anything at stake, hopefully, generally, with what potentially I would think would be the guests are about what's keeping them up at night. And it could be even something not related to the world news, obviously just financial stress or otherwise. And kind of just being like a friendly voice to chat with, and then obviously in a very public manner so that the world could potentially listen and chime in. So I'm not looking for necessarily feedback on the idea of it, but this is where, again, my brain kind of jumps back to this one. But part of this, if I go back to what we were talking about originally, is like, I just want to, like, this is now looking, the grass is greener on this podcast because this other one got hard, is kind of what I'm calling myself on, I guess. And
Sure.
does that make sense or
Absolutely.
resonate when you have ideas like that?
No, totally. Because yeah, like, and that's you hit a level of complexity. You had to decide whether you wanted to push through, and there's lots of variables on that. Is it going to be fun to push through? Do I have the capability to push through? Is it going to be worthwhile to push through? Um, and if the answer to any of that is no, and it's not critical, then just move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Try and find something that sticks.
Yeah. And that's, sorry, I'm trying to paste and there we go. Notion, of course, is being, speaking of pop-ups we were talking about before we started recording. Yeah. And that's exactly that. And that's, but it was also like inspiring, like you said earlier about Brad, like just finding, now I've got your cough, finding joy in random things and letting yourself, what's the word, like pursue that a little further.
Yeah, yeah.
And
He's obviously being very deliberate about it.
yeah, being okay with it not being like, this is the thing that's defining me and this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah,
And if it doesn't generate income, but it's a creative venture that gives me energy in life in these other areas that do actually give me income, I think it's
yeah,
worthwhile in a lot of ways for that. So,
yeah.
um,
And
oops.
there's also there's a lot of uh, I don't perceived pressure to do a thing that's important, to do a thing that's making change, to do a thing that's I set all that aside. Like we're like as you say, we're not politicians, we're not public figures, we don't work in fields that require us to be outspoken in any way. Um, but that doesn't mean that what we want to do is it doesn't have worth. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
Even if that thing is just a conversation once a week or whatever about whatever. Through those conversations, you and I build a relationship, or whomever you're speaking to, you build a relationship with that person. You get to know what they're about a little bit, and you remember. At least for me, like I work alone a lot of the time because I'm an independent contractor and I sit at my desk and I work for clients that are elsewhere. And like that contact with people reminds you of okay, people don't all think like me, and like that's obvious because the world's going to hell, and I would prefer not to go to hell. But the world is a lot rounder than you think it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And
so
that,
even
yeah.
just these quote unquote not important projects are critically important for maintaining relationships with the rest of the world and making sure that people know what you're about, making sure you're learning about everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the yeah, even that connection point, which I've realized a long time ago, and even just talking with Brad yesterday helped me remember this, not just remember this about myself. Is like as much as I like, we were talking about music, and as much as I like playing bands, I have guitars and stuff here, and I like playing in bands, but it's not like a thing that defines me. It's I love doing podcast editing, and the work itself is fine, and I enjoy the work, but the thing I really enjoy there, which is the same as what I enjoy in about music, and what I also enjoy about just even driving across country, is like doing something in collaboration or community with people is a thing that I actually
Mm-hmm.
enjoys, and that's the common sort of through line to all of those things. I don't love doing solo podcasting as much as I did a podcast for a couple hundred episodes of it just to challenge myself, but it wasn't like fulfilling in the same way that even working on someone else's podcast, which I'm not even a voice on, is,
Mm-hmm.
never mind the profit and money side of it, but even just being a part of whatever shop talk show or like this potentially this thing with Brad
Yeah.
is more interesting to me than getting to talk on the microphone. So it's not the microphone, it's not playing the guitar that's like the thing. It's the communal aspect or being a part of
Yeah.
a team or whatever, which I think it sounds
Yeah.
like you're kind of like hinting at too. And like I'm sure you love the idea of like working from home, of being able to set your hours, being like all those things. But every so often there's like, man, it'd be
Sure.
nice just to like turn to the person next to me and ask her, what do you think about CSS3, blah, 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 whatever,
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
just tweet it out into the world.
That's true. And like, yeah. And like, none of these are new thoughts, but like, that's okay too.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, and it's like we're blessed, I think, to have tech jobs that allow that flexibility. Like you could,
Mm-hmm.
in theory, if you were that, whatever the word is, desperate sounds like a bad way of saying it, but if you're really wanting to like have 5 people in the office sharing a fridge or whatever, you
Yeah.
could probably find a job or set something up where you could do that. But
Yeah, I mean, I've done co-working stuff on and off over the years, for that very reason, because like
yeah,
you do get things get stale at the office. So, okay, I can go rent a desk somewhere and there's people there.
yeah,
And that's cool. Just to have people walking around behind you and talking around you and maybe you get to know new people and that's great. But like sometimes a buzz is what you need. And like the, you know, lo-fi chill beats to study to on YouTube isn't cutting it.
it's funny how that one's like so universally known that if you don't,
That whoever made that is they've got to be a millionaire.
yeah, exactly. Oh, I was gonna try out here. Where's my scenes? I had a dog cam set up at one point. My dog decided to join us for a second. There we go. Neville, hey. All right, we'll let him go back to eating his
That dog's got some
bone.
thick hair.
Yeah, that's he's a
And
golden
is
doodle.
that one of those dogs that actually has hair and not fur?
No, I don't actually know what the difference is. Like it would be no, it'd be fur, I think. Yeah,
Well, I'm not 100% sure what the difference is, but there are dogs that don't shed basically, and it's because they have more hair-like follicles instead of fur-like follicles.
right. He would be definitely in
Whatever
the
whatever
like,
that means.
yeah, not shedding as much category, but still has
Hmm.
hair. I don't know. I have to look that
Yeah,
up.
right.
He's about 30 pounds heavier than we were hoping he was going to grow into, and he's only about 8 months old. So.
Okay.
I just walked. I just walked him this morning, and there was another person walking her dog, and she was like, "Oh, a golden doodle." I was like, "Yeah," but hers was like I could pick it up with one hand, and I was like, "How old is yours?" Thinking 2, 3 months or whatever. And she's like, "Oh, he's 18 months old." And I was like, "Oh, wow,
Oh.
we got different genes." Also a golden doodle, but very different sizes. So, anyways,
Yeah.
that's what you get with we have a farmer golden doodle, where it's like maybe it's golden retriever and maybe it's a poodle, whatever, but it's also probably something else.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I digress. So yeah, the conversation with my night brain idea is kind of where I'm drawn to now again because it feels like an easier entry into
Sure.
conversations around things. Like it's almost like it's a vehicle for like just having a conversation, and it doesn't have to be revolve around this. Like it is a silly, fun idea of like, why are you following me? I still am curious about that kind of idea. I'm not abandoning that project,
Hmm.
but completely I am.
Yeah.
But putting it on the shelf, I think, is okay for me to admit to myself out loud. Is what.
Yeah. I know it seems like a tougher sell as well because like following somebody is usually an impulsive act, and there may
Yes.
not necessarily be a reason to spend 45 minutes talking about.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like it's a fun idea if like originally way back when on Twitter when I posted I remember the first tweet I posted around that idea of like it would be fun if when you followed someone they could pop up a little form of like why and like that to me would be
Yeah.
interesting for silly or serious reasons. You'd pop it like type in a little form and say I followed Dave Rupert on Twitter because he posts a lot about CSS, and then it just kind of
That
helps
would be good for
inform.
me to have. Like, why am I following this person?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's actually it's a. I was just editing Shop Talk Show. Dave's. Uh, ooh, I'll hit my microphone. Dave's in the commenting here in the chat, but and they were discussing the idea of context, like remembering context for why a thing happened, whether in a team situation or
Yeah.
even just like in life, like remembering why this you changed your. I'm adding to what they were saying, but like why you moved your cutlery from this drawer to that drawer or whatever. But like how some
Hmm.
apps allow you
Yep.
as a team to have like little notes and comments about why this person emailed about this or whatever. But yeah,
Yeah,
having
it's like when you're coding and you put in little comments to say, "Oh, I changed this because this other thing wasn't working."
yeah, exactly, yeah. But
But then,
having
a lot of the time the comments are just like, "Oh, this is working now. Yay."
yeah, is it like a I don't know I don't use GitHub enough to know like you have to put descriptions if you're behaving properly in a coding situation
Uh,
when you commit
it's
things.
not strict about it, but generally, yes.
Yeah.
Ideally.
Yeah. Yeah. Dave, so Dave's just asking about the dog cam. He must have popped in at the right time there. I noticed it muted your mic, so let's just try this again here, see what happens. I'll unmute. Muted me again. There. So now we can still hear Tim. And so, Dave, it is continuity cam. So I'm just using my phone as a source. I'm using Ecamm Live to stream with, but I know the same thing works in OBS. You can set up a continuity, your iPhone or whatever, as a camera. And it's a little weird trying to like remember which way is which. And I don't know why I have that text on there, but hey, Neville. Neville. Too focused on the bone, which is, I should really be fine with that. It's going to make things infinitely worse if he starts getting bored. So we'll leave him. Let's see if I can pick the right scene while the camera. There we go. Okay.
I've looked into continuity, but it's always like, continuity to me is always like, well, I have other things I need to do with my phone, usually.
Yeah. And I always find that even with like using it as a webcam, I've used my iPhone as the webcam, like the primary camera, which is a great camera.
Yeah.
And part of me is like, well, maybe I should upgrade. If I upgrade my phone, I should keep this one as like the continuity purpose camera.
The webcam.
Yeah. But that's an expensive camera. Like I could sell it for $800 or something. Like I would never devote that much money to, at least personally, I wouldn't for what I use it for. Anyways. But it does make for a great.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, because I could upgrade my phone, but that phone is also extremely valuable still as a phone. So just turning into a webcam, it's like I'll just buy a webcam, which I haven't done because I haven't really needed to. But
yeah, and that's where it's tough because for the few times that I stream, obviously I'm very inconsistent at best, and the few times I have Zoom calls with potential clients or whatever, it's not a deal breaker by any means.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Which it is a funny thing.
The only thing I've really thought about it for is I play a game called Magic the Gathering, which is a card game.
Yeah.
I don't play that often because it's hard to find people to play with. But they do there is an application called Spell Table, which lets you play remotely. But then, of course, you need ideally two cameras, one for yourself and one pointed
like
face
physical card
to the
game,
table
right?
for your cards. Yeah.
Right.
And apparently it works really well. It's just tough to get everybody set up, with like you don't need the face cam, but like setting up an overhead position for your phone and having that phone be good enough and having the lighting be good enough is difficult.
Which I wonder, like the MacBook Pros are supposed to have, and the new iMacs too, have like camera with desk view built in. Like they do that thing like cars do. Where
they
do
like a magic little thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which would maybe get you most of the way there, but they'd have to have a new enough computer. And if they don't,
for sure,
they're not going to go buy a new computer just for, I assume.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And I think most people get by. Like I've seen some photos of some really janky setups, like the phone stuck in a Pringles can, which is hanging off a bookshelf. And like it's a very forgiving community, and it's just a game, so like people nobody's taking it too seriously.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Like speaking of, like I don't know, like this is a tangent, but I'm in the market for a new computer, and I was wondering if you had thoughts about MacBook Air versus MacBook Pro.
Yeah, so I should try and force it to do the non-tariff version. I'm not on here. I'll go back to the screen. I think because this the part that I don't understand or get totally for developers is when are you sitting and waiting? What are you like? Setting aside screen preferences, keyboards, whatever, all that kind of stuff, hard drive space, even like. When are you sitting there and waiting for it to finish blah? Like, or is that even a thing anymore?
What do you mean?
Like, I understand, like if you're doing, like say Xcode and you're like writing an app and you're waiting for it to build the app, then that takes a certain amount of time.
Oh,
so a faster processor would be better. But like for a web dev.
Yeah. For web dev, that's not really a consideration. For me, at least in particular, web dev is really just editing text files.
Right.
Or working with a CMS that's running on a server somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that sort of thing is not important to me.
What's your motivation for upgrading then? switch
Well,
to
my iMac
retail
is
therapy.
the last generation Intel iMac,
Mm.
and it's really starting to like stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes stuff ain't working.
Yeah.
Like it's still supported, which is great, and I appreciate that I still get updates. But certain things are taking a lot longer than they used to because they're just
Yeah.
obviously not a priority to make efficient.
Yes.
So it's still a solid machine. It's just it's my primary machine, and I can't really like wait for preview to work for 15 minutes every morning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes. And
So and it's been 5 years, and like it's had a good life, and like I can still use it as a monitor for whatever my next machine is.
yeah.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
So it's time for a new machine.
All right. So let's just see here the new, because that's I think I was actually just thinking about this myself because I, again, the conversation with Brad I was having where we were talking about like that idea of like the grass is greener. Same thing with like desktop to laptop, laptop to desktop. You're always like, now I'm a
Yeah.
desktop person. Now I'm a laptop person. And
Right. I'm about to make that like by decade switch from like
yes.
desktop to laptop.
And right now I'm on a Mac Studio and it's like, it's super powered, way overpowered, even though it's 2 to 3 years old for me. So I kind of bought it with the idea of like 3 to 5 years I should get out of it, even for my work. Like if I'm doing video work and stuff, it feels like it should have that kind of, if Apple's boasts about their M3, whatever I have,
Yeah.
are true.
Yeah.
But I still am like, now I'm like, it'd be nice to have a super powerful laptop instead of a desktop that I'm chained to, not literally, but stuck
Yeah.
at a desk
Yeah. Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
So, and here, let's just throw on Dave's text here too. Times he spends waiting. Build, compile locally, usually super fast. Test locally, usually a few minutes, enough to get distracted by YouTube. Yeah. Build, test on PR servers, usually tens of minutes, and then build, test on publish, more tens of minutes. So, yeah. So that's maybe a more web app based stuff as opposed to like website itself. But and Dave, I forget I should know this by now, but I forget what kind of machine you're running on, how new-ish, because that would be the higher end of, or on the more requirement side of things, obviously, than what the HTML and yeah. So M3 MacBook
Yeah.
Pro is what he's saying, and that's where I think
Yeah.
like because they just released the M4 based MacBook Airs, if
Yeah.
like obviously anybody can just
I
say,
was. Yeah.
oh sweet, we got some beats going by.
Sorry.
That's awesome. The only sound I get outside my door or outside my office here at home is a grader scraping the street if we're lucky, and then a dump truck or recycling truck. So, yeah, the like obviously a Pro is better than an Air in terms of just raw processing power and upgradability. But right now, I think it's a sweet spot of like the Air being just upgraded to an M4. It's very comparable to the Pro,
Yeah.
and
That's the sense I get.
I think unless you're doing a lot of video or audio production work or
Yeah.
rendering large,
I'm gonna start doing some video, but short stuff and not professional stuff. And so
yeah,
just this year's my like, I want to learn more about this.
and
So I
that's
don't. I think I'm still like tipping back over to the Air side instead of the Pro side because I don't think I need the Pro features. I'd rather have the Air lightness and.
yeah,
But it's still like the M4. Like I literally had it in my cart last week, and then there was a whiff of Apple's gonna say something about the Air tomorrow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dave says he uses a 16-inch MacBook Pro for work, so that's the M3, and then an M1 MacBook Pro 14-inch for personal use, and he loves the smaller machine a lot. I think that's
Yeah.
like whether it's what are the Airs now, a 13 or a 15-inch.
Yeah.
Like the
And
one
I'm so tempted by the 15-inch, but that smaller size is it's just incredible.
because you have
And
a second monitor.
There's no compromise on capability.
Yeah. And that's where like the one, what did I just see? There's like one little like, oh yeah, it doesn't have an HDMI output, HDMI port. So you could like plug an HDMI port straight into your Air like the Pro does. So you'd have to do
Yeah.
USB-C to HDMI if you ever did that. And
Yeah.
the microphone theoretically that's built in is better on the Pro than on the Air, and speakers as well. But again, you've got Beats headphones, it looks like. And yeah. So I think, all things being equal in other respects, like it's not quite the same display, but again, it's such a if you had
Yeah.
told me 5 years
That's what.
ago that
Right.
you're going to get the specs on the Air, you'd be like, give it to me now.
Yeah.
And I don't know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because the what's the price differences? I guess I'm just in Air now, Airland. What was the Pro is probably like what 17.99 and up or something, maybe 15.99
I think it's
somewhere.
less than that, but like the Air starts at 9.99, and I think the Pro starts at like 13.99, something like that.
Because the main issue, like we all run into, is the hard drive space runs out because you have like, at least for me, it was always like on my, I had 1 terabyte. I still have a MacBook Pro, Intel MacBook Pro with 1 terabyte of storage, and it's the photo library that, for my in my case, fills up.
That kills you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even though it's in the cloud or whatever, it still uses so much space, and that's the thing you can't upgrade later, obviously, on any of these machines other than external storage, which is really annoying on a laptop. So I'm
Yeah.
partial to like the mid-range model, but then like jacking up the storage, whether
Yeah.
it's like the 1 terabyte would,
I was gonna go to a terabyte.
yeah, and then which the memory is 16 gigs is probably plenty for what you're describing. So yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I like, so I pull out my MacBook Pro, my Intel MacBook Pro occasionally and do some work if I'm up at the cabin or whatever, and so I can compare it to my studio roughly for most tasks. And it, like, sometimes I do feel like I wasted my money because like like we've talked about on this previous conversations, using Descript in the browser. Well, my
Yeah.
Intel
Right.
based MacBook Pro kind of just does it the same. Like, it's just
Right.
you're streaming from their server as long as you have a good internet connection. It still is a bit faster and snappier on my studio, but like, I
Right.
not
But
three
it's
thousand
fine.
dollars worth.
Yeah. Right.
So
Yeah.
that's where I feel like,
Yeah. I'm in that Intel's a few years old at this point, so I feel like if you're getting any use out of it, you're doing okay.
yeah, and it is like some of those features where you're like, whether it's, I can't think of other ones besides continuity right now, but just new OS features that are kind of nice to have. But like Apple Intelligence being the big billing sort of marketing thing right now, and that's kind of like falling flat on its face. There isn't a huge
Yeah.
reason, unless you're, like I was saying, doing like heavy video work or app development, I guess, on a Pro, where you'd
Yeah.
want to go that route. I think like,
Yeah.
if it's, I know it's not necessarily like budget is the biggest factor here. Like, you're obviously making good use of the iMac that you have in terms of lifespan for it. But like, if you bought the $1,500 version of the MacBook Air, whatever that configuration means, and the equivalent configuration in a Pro would be $2,000 maybe, let's say, and you just stuck that $400 in a, well, I guess this doesn't work now with the stock
Sure.
market being what it is, but
Well, no, now's the time to buy.
yeah, true.
Buy the dip.
If you stuck it in now and then didn't upgrade your computer until Trump wasn't the president, which hopefully is in three
Right.
and a half
Exactly.
years, but then I think you'd almost have, you probably have enough to buy a brand new computer at that point,
Yeah, for sure.
which is sad laughing. But yeah, I've been torn with, and
So
I
I
don't,
think like we're on the same plate here in terms of like for my needs, which are fairly basic. Like I
yeah,
use a computer all day, every day, but I don't do video stuff for work. I don't do audio stuff for work. I don't compile things. Um, the Air is probably the way to go because it's the more pleasant experience, and
yes,
I don't need the extra power that comes from 10 cores or whatever.
yeah. And there was something about how they upgrade. I remember in the Shop Talk Discord too, them talking about this, like how many monitors or what size of monitors you can attach to laptops, and
Oh, you can now have two external monitors as well as have the laptop open,
right. Okay, so that's all.
which you couldn't do before.
Yeah. Okay.
And
So
but that's still for me that's overkill already.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just if you have the 65-inch TV next to you that you want to connect your laptop to,
Yeah.
you're screwed unless you have an adapter, a USB-C adapter. And I guess like 2 USB ports versus 3 on the Pros is a factor, like depending on what you do, right? Because if you're
Yeah.
portable, it is annoying having dongles and adapters and whatever and hubs to carry around. But again, it doesn't sound like you're in that.
Yeah, no, it'll be on the desk most of the time, and then if I'm not at my desk, I don't need all the dongles and stuff.
So then almost the biggest factor would be like whether the 14-inch size is better than the 15-inch Air, like the 14-inch Pro, right? Because they don't make
Yeah.
It's kind of like that sweet spot in between the 13 and the 15 that you could go up to the
Mm-hmm.
Pro for. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that would be like, yeah,
I
go
have
and check
like
it out in the store.
my like couch machine is an M1 Air, and
Mm,
it's like when I buy a new laptop, I think I'm gonna force it on my girlfriend because I don't want to get rid of it because it's a really great machine.
yeah,
It's a perfect it's a perfect everyday machine.
yeah,
I love it.
yeah. That's the my wife has a in one of the last Intel Airs, and if we'd waited like we couldn't for reasons, work reasons, but like if we would have waited 6 months, I think it was, and gotten the M1 Air that came
Yeah.
out, that's like that was the perfect machine to buy for budget and longevity, like just getting an M based machine, whereas the Intel one
Yeah.
showed its age very quickly in light of OS updates and
Yeah. I
yeah,
had the same choice with my with when I got the iMac. The M1 iMacs were just available, but at that time I still needed to run Windows.
right,
Um,
yeah,
so and there wasn't and there still isn't, like there's parallels and stuff like that, but you can't boot natively into Windows, which I need to do like once a week.
right, yeah. So then, are you going forward then, or you just keep that Intel based machine around for that purpose as a dual boot?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So the Intel machine will still be around as a Windows machine once a week, but then just plugged into. I have my laptop plugged into it, so it's a 5K monitor the rest of the time.
right. Nice. Yes. Yeah. That's my kids mainly the reason why they're upset that I haven't sold it yet, but I was planning to sell my Intel MacBook Pro and then just replace it with a 13-inch Air at some point. Um, and but it was a Fortnite machine that was sitting there
Yeah.
in Windows for the whole time basically, unless I went
Right.
on a
Yeah.
trip or something. So, but Xboxes are cheaper than MacBook Airs, so they can figure that out on their own. So was there was there a mic gear question as well, or you're just was that
Yeah,
the
I'd like to also get a better mic. I've been using this Yeti for quite a while,
right? Yeah,
and it's fine, but it's not the I don't know the technical terms I'm looking for. Like it's roomy. It picks up a lot of noises that are like I'd like just this amount of noise, like just here.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
That definitely made a huge difference
I
as
don't
soon
want
as
you
you
to
did
hear
that.
the beats. I don't want you to hear me moving around and stuff like
Yeah,
that. I've been looking at the little are they lav mics that are like people clip on? They're all the rage right now because they all come with like charging cases, so
yes,
they're extraordinarily convenient. I've been looking into something like that.
yes. Because do you do like we'll just use Shure as a brand, but there's other obviously a million different companies that make similar things. But does using your phone with or using the microphone with your phone, is that a thing that you would like to be able to do, or is it kind of like that would be just sort of
Yes.
secondary? Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's a tough one to overcome. Like, so the let me just so the lav mic is not going to be as good as like whatever. Let's say this Shure MV6 or the
Yeah. Yeah.
MV7i, whatever. Like, um, obviously, it's not going to be as good as something like that, but it obviously
Yeah.
gives you portability. It's kind of like the laptop desktop idea. I have seen people cart these ones around because these are just they have a USB-C input as well.
Mm-hmm.
So in theory,
Mm-hmm.
if depending on how new your phone is, you could just plug it into the bottom of the phone and it would just work.
Sure. Yep.
And so that's an option for sure if you're willing to, throw that in your backpack and then also have like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
desk mount or whatever for it. But yeah, the where are they under maybe wireless systems? These are gonna be all like crazy. Oh yeah, the Move mic and that related kind of gear.
And these are generally referred to as lav mics,
Yes, yeah. I'm sure they
or
have
is
some
that
sort
a
of
specific thing?
weird name now that all the kids are using them for TikToks and holding them like they hold them and rather than actually putting them on their lav or
Yeah. Right.
lavalier. Yeah, whatever. Anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, this
Lavalier. Right.
so like this kind of mic, like I said, depends on where you spend most of your time, and it would definitely work. I think quality wise, it would be as good as probably what you're, or if not better than what you have right now at home. But you do run the risk of
Mm-hmm.
like it has the ability to rustle with your jacket or your shirt, or
Yeah.
it's a clip-on thing, so it's maybe visible or whatever. That would be the main sort of whatever struggles, I guess, with it at
Mm-hmm.
home. But something like this definitely gives you a huge flexibility in terms of mobility. And then also, like if you're in a hotel on a work trip and you need to do a call, you can have instantly, way better
Yeah.
audio, or even doing this kind of thing,
Right. Right. Right.
on a
Yeah.
live stream
Exactly.
kind of thing with your phone.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of options. I'm a little bit in the DJI world already, so
oh
they
yeah,
just came out with one as well.
yeah,
So I was looking at that one.
yeah, yeah. That's where are they under power handheld? No, this is all
It's still pretty new. It might be on the homepage. Just scroll down a little bit.
mobile
Maybe not.
7. Like yeah, these are great though. Like gimbals.
The gimbal, like the phone gimbals. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, why am I not seeing
Oh,
any of the
interesting. They're not there anymore.
consumer?
I can't remember what it's called either. I actually ordered one, but I made the mistake of ordering one from China right as Trump was announcing uh, stuff. And like I literally watched it like, oh, it left the factory. It got to the port. It got rejected from the port and went back to the factory.
Oh, this DJI Mic Mini maybe, or maybe
Oh
there's
yeah,
another
the Mic
one.
Mini.
Yeah, I was tempted.
Yeah.
I saw someone else talking about this one. Oh, go away, Google. 169 US, so like $500 Canadian.
And that's
I
for
guess, with them.
two of them,
Yeah,
which
which is
I wish I
awesome.
would only need one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it just connects because it's like a yeah. I think these are great. I think like obviously the TikTok generation or whatever uses them. That's for a 2-pack. I see what you're saying.
You're
Yeah,
right.
$89 for one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Those are great. And I would almost say like buy that if it actually sucks for like using it at your computer for whatever reason,
Yeah.
then you'd end up getting some other kind of mic, desktop mic or whatever. But I would
Yeah.
start with one of these and because even that would
Yeah.
be, I guess you could make the argument that you buy the Pro, the 14-inch Pro with the studio quality, air quotes, studio quality microphone built in, and then buy one of these portable mics, and you save money on the fancier microphone for your
All right.
desktop.
Yeah.
But in theory, you could use the laptop. Like actually, it was funny because I keep referencing this conversation with Brad, but he was like sitting on his patio, talking into his laptop, and I wouldn't have been able to tell audio wise that he was like. I'm assuming there had to be a
Outside.
little bit of wind. Pittsburgh gets wind, I assume, occasionally.
Interesting.
And so it didn't sound as good. Again, it's not as good as something like this, like a direct actual microphone, but for
Right. Yeah, yeah. And that's like generally all I'm looking for. Is like something we've talked about in the past. It's like if you want to get into something, you don't have to meet professional standards right from
exactly.
the jump.
Yeah.
Just like make it sound okay.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, I think now Neville is wanting to go out for real, so we better stop before he pees on something.
Cool.
He's never done in my office, but there's always a first time for everything.
Not always, but often.
Yeah. We had our first poo on the little bit of poo on the couch, so that was a fun
Bummer.
first literally a bummer, but yeah. As he sits there looking all innocent. Here, let's just flip to the dog cam one more time, just for show off.
Yeah.
Hey. Now he's gonna.
That's a big dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can imagine. So like, I'm an adult male walking him. He can pull me a little bit, but add in the fact that everything is ice because it sort of melted and then froze again here, and
Yeah.
so then my daughter, preteen daughter, trying to give him a walk and getting yanked along on the ice and basically just like
Right,
gonna,
right.
he's gonna pull her into traffic one of these times. I feel like so, and we're definitely in the eating everything phase, unfortunately. So that blanket is being destroyed, as you can see,
Right.
live on. Okay, where am I going here? There we go. Okay. Well, thanks, Tim. Hopefully, this is the retail therapy side was helpful, and your podcast
Yeah,
therapist
definitely.
side was helpful. So,
Yeah.
and thanks to Dave if you're out there, and anybody else who stopped by to watch. And I really want to get into a rhythm again of doing this every Thursday, and it's just kind of having the motivation and or purpose to do it, but
Yeah.
working on that.
I
So
think I think if there's a summary to the podcast therapy, it's the rhythm is more important than the topic, if that
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Because the
especially
rhythm will eventually lead to a rhythm in your thinking, and like during the week you're like, oh, I we should talk about this, or we should talk about that, or whatever.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I know I need to follow my own advice of like just doing it, just do it every week or every 2 weeks or whatever the rhythm is. Just do that,
Yeah, whenever you can.
and it starts as maybe garbage and a lot of mumbo jumbo, and then you narrow focus
Yeah,
and
and eventually it'll be a Minecraft podcast.
exactly. I need to spend like 10 minutes just seeing if that audio exists somewhere on the internet to repurpose it. But yes.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Tim. Good luck in your MacBook
Thank you.
purchase and your decisions there.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
we'll talk again next week. See ya.